I think that diplomacy is the key, and sanctions in the context of negotiations are fine. I don't think that they by themselves are decisive. If the idea is that the sanctions are going to break Russia, prevent Russia from doing huge damage in Ukraine, stop the possibility of Russia's military effort and so forth, that I doubt. If the thought is that the sanctions are going to cause Russia by itself to retreat in the absence of a diplomatic and political settlement of some kind, I doubt that. So the question really is how sanctions are understood and calibrated. I think that they are appropriate as a reaction to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but I don't think that they are decisive, and I don't think that they are a substitute for diplomacy. I think they are a complement for diplomacy. There's a lot of experience with sanctions, even very tough sanctions. Sanctions generally do not bring down regimes, generally do not even change politics of sanctioned countries. The United States has been sanctioning Venezuela to the hilt for the last nearly 5 years. President Maduro is still very much in power. It did not lead to the desired political outcomes that the United States government was claiming or hoping for. And that's the normal experience. The US likes sanction regimes. They're inexpensive. They create a huge amount of damage in the sanctioned countries, no doubt. But unfortunately, for the US point of view, they don't lead to the political outcomes. They cause damage, but they generally don't have the decisive political effect that maybe some hope for or some claim. I think that's the essential issue in this context. I doubt that they're going to spare Ukraine from devastation. What could spare Ukraine from devastation is negotiations and diplomacy. There's a backdrop also that is important, of course, in the Russia-Ukraine horrific invasion and destruction now going on. And that is that there were calls for more prudence on the Western part, that is on the US and NATO side for 30 years, frankly, around NATO enlargement. I think the US was provocative, and I'm not alone in that by any means. Many close observers outside of government and some inside of government said in 2008, what are you doing to George Bush Jr. in making a statement that Ukraine will be a member of NATO? A lot of people knew from that moment that that was an extraordinarily dangerous path to follow. And then, of course, things got amplified in 2014 when the United States backed the ouster of the pro-Russian President Yanukovych and so forth. I think the point is that sanctions by themselves are not going to solve this problem, but there is an approach diplomatically that really could make headway, even headway in the next hours or days. That's what I'm very much hoping for. It's a defensive alliance if you're inside NATO, and it looks different if you're outside NATO. The idea that the United States-led alliance was going to become a part of the Russian border region, it didn't look so defensive. The fact that NATO has played a role in many conflicts that, to Russia's point of view, don't look quite so defensive in operation. Bombing of Belgrade in 1999, or engagement in Libya, and the list is actually quite long. defense is in the eye of the beholder. It's natural that NATO says we're defensive, we're peaceful. It's actually quite natural that Russia views it in a different perspective in the context of roughly the last 25 years of history. I think that one issue is pretty clear. This is an issue of Ukraine's neutrality. And I think that that was desirable without a war. It might have forestalled this war. Then come two other issues that are more complicated. One is Crimea, and the thing that makes this extraordinarily difficult is the entire history of Crimea and its central role in Russian security, because it is the core base for Russia. And then is the eastern provinces, where one shudders at the idea of an invasion leading to border changes. And my hope, my negotiating position, if I were negotiating, would be back to the Minsk II agreements, the idea that these regions, Russian-speaking regions close to Russia, would have some semi-autonomy under Ukrainian sovereignty. But what the two parties come up with, and it's a broader issue, obviously, let's be realistic. It's not just the two parties, it's about the United States, and it's about NATO also. I hope that one can find a diplomatic course that at the core is about neutrality of Ukraine, because that was proper and prudent from the start. On how these other issues, which are serious issues, are handled, I would hope that they're handled in a way that absolutely respects Ukrainian sovereignty, does not give the ability of war to capture the territory of another country, but finds a diplomatic way forward, which, by the way, was what the Minsk process was aiming to do. So I think that there are obviously delicate issues. It's not for us to settle them on a call like this, but I think that there are, and they are somewhat competing goals. But the most important idea is we're not going to end this by economic warfare against Russia, that's somehow going to solve this problem, or the belief that there aren't diplomatic issues that are real and that are on the table and that need to be resolved. Both of those are crucial points, and we should give support to a negotiating process to bring this horrific, murderous, thuggish killing and destruction in Ukraine to a quick end.